And as the kids are headed out, I invite you to take a look at the side screens.
Lives are full of brokenness. From the time we are young, we experience hurt, anxiety, fear, brokenness. Broken relationships, betrayal, hopelessness, helplessness. Our bodies experience pain and trauma physically and emotionally. We have regrets and long to be healed and made whole. Where can a person find hope? How can the broken pieces be put back together and be made whole?
So that's just a little bumper to our new series, Broken But Not Defeated. And as I begin this morning, I just got a question for you. Have you ever broken anything? So I have here my former pepper shaker. It was fully functional up until Tuesday when I broke this thing. So I was preparing a venison crock pot roast, and I'd gotten everything done. I have a fairly large little counter that I'm working on, and somehow this pepper shaker, I pushed it off to the side, and at some point, this trash bag, this grocery bag, somehow it ended up on top of the pepper shaker. Now, I don't know why I did that. I don't know how it did or whatever, but it was sitting there, and so I grabbed this bag, and as I grabbed it, the pepper shaker slid off the counter, and I saw all this happen like in split seconds. And reflexively, I reached out my foot, had my trusty Crocs on, those rubber Crocs, make a nice cushion fall, right? And I was successful, actually. When that fell, it landed right square, right on the center of my foot. Perfect landing. I thought I survived, except it had to slide another inch off and onto our ceramic floor, kitchen floor, and it just cracked. And of course, that's a frustrating experience. Have you ever broken anything? As I picked this thing up and just kind of looked at it and thought about the mess that I had made and now the cost, which is pretty insignificant in that it's just a glass pepper shaker, I did think about how this is such an illustration for my life. How there's so many things in my life that are broken and have gotten broken. Just like on Friday, I mailed back my cell phone because the battery in it had swollen so much so that it broke. It split the frame right off of the case. Fortunately, Google replaced it free of charge. But so there was a pepper shaker on Tuesday, a cell phone on Friday. Last week I went out to cut the grass. The carburetor on the lawnmower was giving me issues and it didn't want to work. Last month I had to deal with the vacuum cleaner. The hose on the vacuum cleaner split. You ever had that problem? I found a pretty cool YouTube video about how to stitch it back together. Anyways, that's another story. And on I can go. I can just think about all the things in my life that have been broken. Oh, right now I'm picturing a dining room window. I was not home. My wife and I were away. And one of the kids, a rubber bouncy ball right through the dining room glass window. Yeah, so we've got a broken glass window. That child's name will not be mentioned. How about a Frisbee through the glass or through the plastic backboard? Or the golf ball that one of the kids hit through the lampshade, on the post, outside the house at the neighbors. Like on and on and on I can go. Broken plates and glasses and vases and picture frames. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in my life that has gotten broken. Can you relate? Yeah, have you broken anything? It's not just me, right? And the reality is, everything in life is breaking down because we live in a broken world. Now, to be honest, this is pretty inconsequential, right? These are pretty insignificant things. There's a way more significant things than when you think about things that get broken. And so I think about, for example, that we've all seen the image on the bottom there of the cargo ship that took out 1.6 miles of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, right? And just how it just broke that, collapsed that. This past Tuesday, that upper image comes from Taiwan. Massive earthquake in Taiwan toppling numbers of buildings, just breaking and destroying them. The image on the right, we have a team of people, part of our external focus ministry. We've sent a team of people with EFCA crisis response to Kentucky. Over 2 years ago, there was a flood. We just sent them off last week. We prayed over them. And they're down there right now. They're down there. That team is worshiping in the free church down there. And tomorrow, all week long, they'll be assisting and helping families who have lost their homes more than 2 years ago. Just broken, devastated. And for as difficult as those things are to talk about being broken, I think about even more personal and probably even harder things, right? So now I begin to think about the body and how the body breaks down, right? And those that lose their hearing and lose their eyesight, those that have cancer, there's several within our church family who are dealing with broken bodies. With it, I think of how the mind gets broken. My wife and I both are dealing with aging parents whose minds are not working right. For those of you who may be dealing with family members, bipolar, depression, anxiety, PTSD. For Valerie and I, it's Alzheimer's and it's paranoia and the things that are said that are very hurtful. And we could talk further about how the body ultimately does succumb to all of its brokenness, right? And every one of us eventually dies. There is a lot of brokenness. Everything in our world ends up broken. I mean, this is just the reality of living life. And so, while everything in the world is broken, because the world is continuously broken down, it doesn't mean, though, that we have to be defeated. And so we have the next slide here. We'll have that little quote for us. Right? Just because everything in the world is continuously broken down, it doesn't mean that we have to be and live defeated. When, again, back to our vision to be internally strong, when we talk about being internally strong, we talk about having strength on the inside of us, having the ability, the health, the strength, the courage, the ability to live through the broken things, the brokenness all around us, and the brokenness within us. So yes, while this is true that we are broken people living in a broken world, we don't have to live defeated. We don't have to live broken lives. That's what we're about as a church, about recognizing this, about helping, identifying it, saying it, embracing, saying, yes, this is true. This is who we are as people. We are broken. This is the reality. All people are broken. Just because we're connected to a church, just because we're connected to Jesus, doesn't mean that we get away from all of that. No, we live in a broken world. But what we're about as a church is finding the strength to live through that brokenness. So this is the series that we are starting today, right? Broken, but not defeated. Now, the series is coming out of the book of Psalms, okay? For the next 8 weeks, we're going to be looking at different Psalms. We're not going to look at all the Psalms. We're going to look at 8 different Psalms. Today, Psalm 34. But what I invite you to do over the next 8 weeks is to read through the Psalms. Now, if you take me up on these challenges, if you took me up on the challenge over last month, in our series, Jesus, Who Are You? You were challenged to read the book of John. If you did, you read through the book of John probably at least once, maybe even twice. If you take me up on this challenge and you read 3 Psalms a day, just 3 Psalms a day. Now, some of them are really long, so some days you might want to read 5 or 6 Psalms. But if you read 3 Psalms a day, you'll read the whole book of Psalms while we're in this series. Now, again, why do I make a big deal about that? Because, again, our vision to be internally strong, one of the things we talk about in being internally strong, where we start, is to know Jesus and his word. As we know his word, it helps us to be strong on the inside. So today, again, we're looking at Psalm 34. The title of our message is Broken by Affliction. So broken by brokenness, broken by the hard things that we experience in life. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn there. You can follow along on the side screens as well. But while you're turning there, just some background information on this psalm. So the first thing maybe to know about the psalm, because we read in English what stuff we miss that's in the original language. And so I'm going to highlight some of that. The first thing about this psalm is it's a work of poetry. It's a poem. And it's a particular kind of poetry is an acrostic poetry, which means that the first letter of the verse begins with the first letter of the alphabet, and then the second verse, the first letter of that is the second letter of the alphabet, the third verse, the third letter of the alphabet, and so on. And so when you look at it visually in English, it would be A, B, C, D, right, all the way to Z. You'd see that. So visually, you'd see that. The other important thing that you would see is that the very last two verses go out of sequence. It's like, oh, wait a minute. That's very obvious, which what the writer is doing is drawing our attention to what is said in those last two verses, as though this is like the summary or the significant point of the psalm. So as we begin the psalm, Psalm 34, which is all about brokenness, we see this little explanation. David, when he pretended to be insane before Abimelech, who drove him away, and he left. All right, so that's some more context to the psalm. And that might remind you, what this does is it reminds us of the Old Testament story in which David found himself, after he was successful in defeating Goliath, becoming very famous within the nation, and Saul, the king, becoming jealous and desiring to kill him. David's next move, once he finds out that Saul is going to kill him, is David flees. And where he flees is to Gath, which is the place where this king lives. He flees to Gath. Now, what's interesting about that is that Goliath, whom David had killed just a few years ago, was from Gath. So think about how crazy that is. David, who killed the notorious warrior of Gath, is going to go to Gath to hide out from now his new enemy, King Saul. So that's a pretty bold move on the part of David. Obviously, that tells us that David was in big trouble, right? He experienced trouble. And the trouble he was experiencing was the result of the brokenness of Saul. Saul had gone insane. He'd gone crazy. The evil one was influencing him. And so David flees, making this choice, and his only thought about how he might find safety here is to act insane. And so that's what David does. He pretends he's insane. He allows his drool to drool down into his beard and get all caught in his beard. He goes around with rocks and scratches on the door and the gate posts. And then the king is like, why are you bringing this guy to me? Okay, so yes, we know that he's the guy who Israel says he has slain, Saul has slain 10,000, but David has slain far more. We've heard all this. We know this. We know that David has killed our hero in Goliath, but he's insane. And so David survived that. Okay, so this is the context in which David writes this psalm. David's in trouble. David's in physical trouble. David has an enemy who's pursuing him. David has somebody who's trying to kill him. Can you feel the anxiety of that? Can you feel the stress of that? Can you put yourself in that situation and know what it's like to be in that kind of trouble? That's where David is. So let's pick up Psalm 34. I'm going to read the whole text. And just before I do this, one last comment, and that is this. When you read, so again, back to internally strong, knowing Jesus and his word, how important it is to know his word. Why we want to know his word is because his word leads us, guides us, assists us, helps us, strengthens us, okay? But you have to be able to make something of the word, and a lot of times people struggle. What is the word? What is God saying? So just three things to remind you of. When you read the word, always ask, what's the main idea? What's the main idea of the section that I'm reading, or just the verse that I'm reading? What's the main idea? To help you get at that, watch for repeated words, repeated phrases, things that get said over and over, things that are odd, things that stick out. So we talked about that, like in the acrostic poem, the last verse, key, right? You got to pay attention to that. So as we read, pay attention to words that are repeated. Watch for verbs. What are the verbs? Those are the action words. What are they telling us? Okay? Now, a lot of times for me, when I read and study God's word, I have to read it again, and I have to read it again, and I have to read it again. And so like this text I've read, I don't know how many times this past week, and it's very interesting. Even as I study and study and study, I keep learning and seeing new things. All right? So here we go with all of that as the background. Remember, it's about brokenness that we're addressing. It's the main idea, right? We're broken, but we don't have to be defeated. Verse 1. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. My soul will boast in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. We were just led in this way. I don't know if you paid attention to the songs that we sang, if you heard the words that James uttered and challenged us with. It was to encourage us to praise God, to extol him, to lift up a hallelujah was the song that we sang, right? Rise up, O soul within me. You got a lion in there, right? In spite of your circumstances, whatever your circumstances are, let's praise God. And no, let the afflicted hear, those that are oppressed, those that are in trouble. And then he says this, glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. So this is like a corporate kind of worship, which we just did. I sought the Lord. Now he gets personal. He's going to tell us his story. I sought the Lord, and God answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man, me, David, this poor man, I called out, and the Lord heard me. He saved me out of all of my troubles in the city of Gath and Saul who's pursuing me. The angel of the Lord, and here's the truth, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. I fear God, I respect God, I'm trusting in God. The angel of the Lord encamps around me, and he delivers them. And then David invites us. He says, taste and see that the Lord is good. In other words, move close to God and experience him. And as you do, you will see that it's worth it. You'll want more of him. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him, the Lord. Fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, if you want to be internally strong, keep your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking lies. Turn from evil, do good, seek peace, pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them on the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all of their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. A righteous man may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all of his bones. Not one of them will be broken. A reference to Jesus on the cross. Evil will slay the wicked, or calamity is another way to translate this. Calamity will come upon those who are evil, who do evil. The foes of the righteous, those who are against the righteous, those who are against what is right, will be condemned. This is that last verse. This is the highlight. The Lord redeems his servants, and no one will be condemned who take refuge in him. Wow. So there's a lot here, right? There's so many thoughts in this text that in the next 15 minutes, we just can't get into all of it. If you were maybe paying attention to repeated phrases, if you were reading on the slides, you were seeing that I was highlighting those phrases, right? You saw in red, in blue, in green, these phrases that they're all connected together. So, for example, you heard the phrase, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. The Lord, in Hebrew, 4 consonants, no vowels. You can't say it because you can't speak without having vowels. 4 consonants is the name of the Lord. It just simply means He is. It references his sovereignty, that there is a being who is sovereign, who is over all, who is all authoritative. If you paid attention, you would count 16 times. 16 times in these 20 some verses that David references the Lord. The next thing that you would have observed is brokenness. Over 10 times, we see David talking about brokenness, his brokenness, and righteous people's brokenness. We saw it in terms of phrases like affliction, trouble, hardship, distress, fear, crying out, the brokenhearted, those who are crushed in spirit. Next, these verbs. The verbs in green, God's response to David's brokenness. These are God's actions. 11 times are these 11 action words. Words like God delivers, He saves, He encamps around, He protects, He's close to the brokenhearted, close to those who are crushed in spirit. So you have God, you have David's troubles, you have God's response to David's troubles, and then lastly, you have David's actions. So God has actions, David has actions. And there's 16 of David's actions in 3 different categories. The first 4 come from the first 2 verses, and it's all about the idea of worshiping God, right? So it was those 4 words, like extol, boast, glorify, exalt Him. Next, it's about pursuing Him. Words like seek Him, look to Him, call to Him, taste and see that He's good, take refuge in Him. These are all admonitions for what I should do in terms of pursuing and interacting with God. And then lastly, ways that I need to behave, keeping my tongue from evil, my lips from speaking lies, turning from evil, doing good. On and on and on. So, in my study, I kind of get this far through this and I see all this and then you go, like, what is it that David is saying here? 6 times he talks about God, talks about all this trouble that David has. What are some lessons that we can take away from these 22 verses? And the first lesson that I wrote down is this, that God doesn't prevent my brokenness. Like all those times in the text, David talks about brokenness, right? Crying out, being in trouble, having a crushed spirit. we're going to focus all of our time on these 3 verses right here, verses 17 to verse 19, in terms of the lessons. There's a lot of lessons, but this is it right here. We're going to just focus on these 3 verses and that first lesson. God doesn't prevent my brokenness. Okay, maybe that doesn't need to be said, but maybe it does need to be said. Maybe it does need to be said because maybe I do have this thought that if I am a righteous person, or if I am a church-going person, or if I am a person who's pursuing God, then that means that God's going to protect me, right? And this is a false idea. It's a false idea because everybody wants to be protected from brokenness. All people. This is what we're doing in pursuit of life when we talk about being internally strong, right? We're talking about finding something inside that's meaningful and satisfying, but we're also talking about, I want to make my life comfortable. I want to make it safe from anything that's broken. So you have to understand that that's not the way God works. God doesn't prevent brokenness in your life. And we just need to accept that. We need to embrace that. We need to go, okay, the reality that I have broken stuff, the reality that my body's broken, the reality that my relationships are broken, the reality that this brokenness is because I live in a broken world and things are constantly moving towards brokenness. This is an important learning. Now, the next thing that you go, though, is you probably go, well, why? Like if God, his name I can't say because he is and he's sovereign, he's over everything, and he's all powerful, he's all loving. Why? Why, if he's loving, why does he allow these brokenness things to happen in my life? And all the answer to that is not here in this text. And so in some ways we kind of sidestep the text a little bit. That's the wrong way to say this. We have to go to other places in Scripture to find answers to that why question. But in this text, one of the answers perhaps that we can see in this text is that because God is sovereign, that's why things are broken. And what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is this. God designed the world to function in a particular way. And everything that doesn't function the way that God intended for it to function ends up broken. So I write this little statement, right? Brokenness results when something goes against the function of its design. And so you take my salt or my pepper shaker, right? It's broken. Why is it broken? Well, it's broken because God designed the world according to some natural laws. Isaac Newton uncovered and discovered them. He named them, right? Called gravity. This is just the way gravity works. And it's a good thing that we have gravity, right? Because you are able to sit in a chair because the chair is being pulled to the floor. And you can sit there and you can stand up on the floor and your body is pulled to the floor and you can walk around because of that and you get in your car. Gravity is a good thing. And gravity is always at work. Now, when things go against gravity, that's when they get broken. When things go against God's design, that's when brokenness occurs. God designed the world to work in a particular way. God designed people to work in a particular way. And when anything goes against that design, it ends up broken. Now, secondly, things end up broken because it's part of the curse. Because people went against God's design in Genesis chapter 3. We can go back and we can read that. Because people went against God's design, God said there's a consequence. There's a consequence for going against God's design. When I pulled my pepper shaker off, the consequence is that it's now broken. The consequence for sin is death. There was no death until sin came. There was no brokenness until brokenness entered into the world. The wages of sin is death, Paul says in Romans 6:23. And so things get broken because it's the consequence. So natural disasters occur, all kinds of things anything that's broken is broken as a consequence. Third, people are broken, right? You live with people. You live around people. People are broken and people do broken things. People don't function the way that God designed them to function. When people behave wrongly, we call that sin. Sin is missing the mark. It's going off the course. It's falling short. It's not functioning the way that it was designed to function. When I sin, when I don't function the way that I'm designed to function, it hurts me. When I sin against you, it hurts you. And more brokenness comes because now that hurt is inflicted upon you. And now we start to get deep into our soul. And when we get into this place, what we need to understand is that the only way for help, the only way for restoration, the only way to put back the brokenness is what we celebrated last week in the work of Jesus on the cross, and how he is like that big giant eraser that can erase the effects of death and erase the effects of sin and thus restore us. Now, we're not all put back together totally and perfectly, but that is the work of Jesus on the cross. So the first learning from this passage is there's brokenness, right? And why God doesn't prevent the brokenness is those three reasons. Because this is the way the world works, right? The world is broken. People sin. But the word of comfort is that God is present in my brokenness, right? And so that's the next part when you read more carefully the psalm. You see that God and his verbs, that God's actions to David's trouble, to David's brokenness, is that God hears, he delivers, he's close, right? He saves, he delivers, and he protects. And when you see that, well, before I go there, let me just read what I wrote in my notes. God promises to be close to the brokenhearted. He's promised to be with you in your hurt, to be a source of power, of courage, of wisdom, helping us through our trouble. But sometimes he chooses to deliver us from our problems and our troubles, and sometimes he doesn't. But that doesn't negate this reality that God is close to the brokenhearted. We either by faith believe that, or by faith reject that. Everybody lives by faith. By faith that he's close to me in my brokenness, by faith that he's abandoned me in my brokenness. It's by faith. Now the big question that comes is like, how? How is God near me, right? Because it doesn't feel like he's near me. It doesn't feel like he's with me. It doesn't feel like he's protecting me. It doesn't feel like he's helping me. It doesn't feel like God is close to me. I received this email some time ago. We'll just read the email from an individual who was going through deep brokenness through the death of somebody very close. And the writer wrote, "I feel so guilty right now. Did I do enough? Did we make the best decisions? Should we have gone to the hospital earlier? Why wouldn't God give us just a few hours or minutes with him? Is that too much to ask? People try to find good in all of this. I don't find any. Perhaps that is not entirely true, but it doesn't lessen my pain or answer my questions. I don't understand. I cannot pray except to rant and to rave and to cry. God remains silent and seemingly to me very distant." The cry of this person is, where is God in my brokenness? How is he close to me in my brokenness? How is he with me when I have a crushed spirit? Because it doesn't feel like that. And as a matter of fact, the only thing I can do, he writes, is to rant at God, to offer complaints, which is very interesting because that's exactly what other psalmists do as well. So take, for example, Psalm 10, where the writer says to the Lord, "Why do you stand far off, and why do you hide yourself in my trouble? I thought you were close to the brokenhearted. I thought you bound up those who are crushed in spirit. Why are you so far away then in my trouble?" Or Psalm 13, how long, O Lord? How long is this going to go on? How long are you going to forget me? Forever? How long will you hide your face from me? And then I love this one, Psalm 44. Awake, O Lord, why do you sleep? Wake up, rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and our oppression? Like, where are you, God? Like, how are you present in my brokenness? Because it seems like you fell asleep and you're not helping me. So that's a really big question then, right? How is God present with us? No. Let's read the passage again. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. How is the Lord close to the brokenhearted? The Lord is close to the brokenhearted in spirit. So there's a little bit of theology here, right? We have to understand that God is spirit. Last week we celebrated that God, who is spirit, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, God, one person, three persons. God, the Son, came and took upon himself a body, but God is spirit. And those who put their faith in him, God sends his spirit to live within them. God is spirit. And how God is close to the brokenhearted is that God's spirit is close to your spirit. Now think about this. All of us as people, we have a body, right? And we experience this brokenness in the body. We experience physical brokenness. This is the whole disease thing that we talked about, right? We experience emotional brokenness. Now we're talking about this part inside of us, our spirit. Right? And so as people, we're complex people, and we can be broken physically and we can be broken spiritually. But it's important to note that God cares most about the spirit. That's not to say he doesn't care about the body, but it's the spirit that is eternal, not the body. We get a new body, so it's not that the body is insignificant, but it's the spirit that is eternal. And so God, the Spirit of God living within us, and us having a spirit, the Spirit of God meets us inside. God does this. He helps you to think the right thoughts when all this trouble is going on around you. In and of yourself, you can't think of the right thoughts. God helps you with your emotions. He helps you deal with your emotions. He doesn't take your emotions away. It's not that your emotions are wrong or bad, but he assists you and helps you with your emotions. God provides comfort in your spirit as you're going through all of your emotions. See, spiritual life is what we need to live through our temporary physical afflictions. What we need is spiritual life, our spirit to be alive, and the Spirit of God is close to our spirit. I'll give you a quick illustration of how this worked for me personally. And why don't I just invite the worship team to come on up in light of our time. So many of you know that in 2000, my wife and I were informed that our 2.5-year-old son, Luke, had leukemia. We journeyed through that battle for about a year and a half. And the final 90 days of Luke's life was in the hospital. Some of that time here at Hershey, the rest of it down at Johns Hopkins. And while we were at the hospital, it was a long time. A lot of stuff, right? Lots of hurt, lots of trouble, lots and lots of trouble. I learned the value and the importance of the Lord's Prayer. Jesus taught us to pray. And now he taught us to pray, Our Father who's in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Now I'm going to submit my will to your will. God, you're sovereign. You have a name I can't speak. You're over all. Your will be done, not my will. Learning to submit my will to his will. And then there's this phrase, give us this day our daily bread. I began to pray that prayer spiritually. God, give me the spiritual bread that I need, the spiritual nourishment that I need, the help that I need to do what I need to do right here and right in this moment. Give that to my wife, Valerie. Give that to my son, Luke. Spirit, right? I'm crying out to God. And God, in spirit, met me in my spirit. And he encouraged me, and he comforted me, and he helped me with all of the emotions and all of the questions and all the rants that I had. And that's how God works. If you find yourself in trouble, rather than trying to solve it on your own, go to God, which is the last point. So the last thing in this text is this mention of righteous. So can you go to the last slide right here? God's presence is promised to the righteous. Right? It's to the righteous. It's to and the phrase "the righteous" is those who know God, those who put their faith in God, those who are trusting in God. The righteous, they don't have God. The righteous, and if you were here this morning and you know that you're not a follower of God, you're not a follower of Jesus, God in flesh, and you know this, then you also know that you're alone. You're all alone in your brokenness. You're alone in dealing with your brokenness. You're alone in trying to find answers and help. You're alone in trying to find any kind of comfort. It is the righteous. It is those who have recognized that they can't live life alone, that they've got a problem, that they're broken, that the only way to have the pieces of their life put back together is to confess their need. So if you're here this morning, and you're not part of the righteous, it's very simple, it's very easy, but it is a big choice. Are you ready to give up being the God of your life? And are you ready to say, God, be the God of my life? I need you. I need you. It's very simple. Just say that to God. Forgive me. I need you. Help me. And for all of us who are a part of the righteous, this, again, with all of those questions, it comes back to a choice of faith. Am I going to choose to believe that God is close to me, or am I not? When I choose to believe that he's close to me, it affects the way that I think, it affects the way that I live. If I choose to believe he's neglected me, he's forgotten me, I'm all alone, it takes me down another path as well. This text tells us, if it's the truth, that God is close to the brokenhearted. We live in a broken world. Things are breaking down. But just because we live in a broken world and things are breaking down, it doesn't mean we have to live defeated. We can have strength. We can have internal strength. All right? Because God is close to the brokenhearted. Let's sing this song as a testament to that.
Would you stand with us? Faithful promises.
You never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. You never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. You never let me down. Shout out! I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. You'll never let me down. You'll never let me down. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
I get it. None of this makes sense. It doesn't. We can't explain it, right? Thing fell to the floor. I mean, we get that. It broke. It's really hard. If you have questions, you want to talk more about this, I'd be glad to do that. I mean, this was just like a sprint through an incredibly complex question. But let's leave remembering that God is close to the brokenhearted. He is close to us. Hold on to that in faith. Have a good week.